You have your Bible with you? If you want to follow Jesus, that's what we're going to do. Jesus has set us examples, and we're going to do that in Philippians chapter 2. So put your finger on that text. We're going to go through that later. And at the same time, if you have your iPhone, whatever you're using as your Bible app, it's all accepted. But this morning, overcoming pride. Just to go through what we have done so far in our Overcomers series. We'll talk about fear, bitterness, anger, discouragement, worry, depression, temptation, loneliness, and stress. So if you missed any of these and you want to listen to the sermon online, it's on our Facebook, New Life Alliance Church BC Facebook. Let me read to you just the beginning verses of Philippians 2. It goes like this. If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from His love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. So the goal is to be all in one mind and one spirit today. So especially in the message of overcoming pride, because all of us can attest to this. At least I can, and maybe you can too. So there's a saying that goes like this: birds of the same feather. What is it? Birds of the same feather, they're eaten together. No. Birds of the same feather flock together. But that's not all birds, because owls are known to be wise birds. And so when they come together, they're not flocking together. They're called parliament, because they're smart. They're wise people, birds. That's the owl. And when monkeys get together, they're called troops. That's what they do. They come together and they can throw rocks at you. That's what they're good at. And when animals get together, like there's a stampede of some cattle, they're called the herd, right? Have you heard of that? Have you heard of the herd? Now here's the thing. When lions get together, what is it called? Pride, right? When lions get together, they're called pride. Have you ever thought why they're called pride? Because they are king of the jungle. They're known for royalty. In fact, the lions are on the top of the food chain. The lion eats something, if they really like you, they'll eat you. But these lions are basically elevated in the group of all animals, and so they're called pride. So in other words, when you are higher up, then you think yourself with the lions. And just to let you know, I have a confession to make. I belong to the lions. And if you are honest with yourself, you do too. Because pride is really something in us, inside. So let me explain how it comes out, how pride shows up. So to give you an example, pride shows up in this way. If you are a critical person, so you like to criticize people, some people think criticism is the gift of the Spirit. Oh, Pastor, I have a gift of the Spirit. What is it? Criticism, being critical. But when you like to put criticism, basically is putting people down. And so when you put people down, what are you trying to do to yourself? You're putting yourself up. You belong to the lion. And so pride comes to criticism, even judgmental. And if you are a perfectionist, you like to do things perfectly, that comes with pride. And if you like to compare people, like, oh, you like to compare your work, you like to compare your income, you like to compare your wife, your husband, your kids, your grandparents. You like to compare things. Maybe you compare your dress. Wow, her dress is nothing compared to my dress. Or maybe you like to compare your car. Well, my car is better than his car. So, also if you have a problem saying sorry, if you have a problem admitting that you are wrong, then you have pride. And also if you are in a group, like if you are in a group, you're talking to one another, and you're telling jokes, and your joke has to be better than the previous joke, then there's a pride issue. Like someone say, you know, my dad, he built the Grouse Mountain. Oh yeah? Yeah, my dad killed the Dead Sea. No, that's like, my joke is better than your joke kind of thing, right? Who killed the Dead Sea? My dad killed the Dead Sea. And so if you have all that stuff, you know, if you like to win arguments, you know, some people, they want to win the argument. There's a pride there. And just to warn you, if you like to win all the arguments, someone says the more arguments you win, the less friends you will have. So that's how pride comes out. For example, give an example. One woman, she was interviewing somebody. She goes like this. She's actually just interviewing somebody, but she was talking all about herself. Like talking non-stop about herself. You know, how good she was, all that stuff, her dress, her new hair stuff, all the color of the dress. And then she's, after all talking for a long time about herself, she stopped and said, okay, enough about me. Now let's talk about you. She goes, what do you think about me? So it's still about herself. So that's how pride comes out. And as I have studied the Word of God, I realized, and I didn't just realize this week, I realized that I belong to not to the herd, but to the lions. And so things need to be checked out. So just to remind us what it is that God says, it goes in 1 Peter 5:5-6, it says, so all of you, clothe yourself with humility toward one another, because, let's read this together, ready to go. God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that He may lift you up in due time. So pride is very, very important. God is really opposed of that for some reason. More than anything else in His sin, God is opposed of pride. You know why? Because Satan's fall started because of his pride. Adam and Eve's sin started because of their pride. I was going to say her pride, but I don't want to get into trouble with you. That's not the point of the argument. But it started with their pride. So let's learn from Jesus, as taught to us by the Apostle Paul, what it means to take care and overcome at some point in our lives pride. And it's very, very important for us, especially those who are children of God, to overcome pride in our lives. Number one, practice self-awareness. In our text, it says in verse 3 and 4, it goes like this: do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. And then verse 4 it says, each of you should look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. So if you look at the verse, self is very, very important. It has selfish ambition, it has interest, or you can call it self-interest as well. But if you want to overcome pride in your life, you need to be aware of the self. Why? Because the self is the center of you. And in fact, the focus of pride is really the self. So that's why you see words selfishness, self-interest. So because of the self, because self is the focus of pride, pride actually seeks to defend yourself all the time. So whenever you go to work and you have argument there, you want to defend yourself, and pride comes out of that. And so, for example, Max Lucado says this. He writes, the self-centered see everything through self. Their motto, it's all about me. The flight schedule, the traffic, the dress styles, the worship style of the church, the weather, the work, everything is filtered through the mini-me in the eye. So when we are born into the world, we simply have that mini-me. And that's why they always say it's about survival of the fittest, right? And so it's all about me. It's all about what I see. And so in the Bible, Jesus tells this story of a parable of a Pharisee and a tax collector. So a Pharisee was praying and a tax collector was praying as well. Pharisees goes like this. I don't know if you notice the eye in this guy has an eye problem, right? He goes like this. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like the other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give a tenth of all I get. So you notice the word eye there? So this is a guy with an eye problem, that's for sure. So biblical example is that self is really the number one that we think about. Why do you think you go to work? To feed yourself, to feed your family. And see, there's nothing wrong with that. But that, taking care of yourself, when you overdo it and all you think about 24 hours a day is yourself, then that's the cultivation of pride. Listen to what David Rhodes says. He says like this, pride is the dandelion of the soul. Its roots go deep, only a little need to be left behind and it can sprout again. Its seeds lodge in the tiniest encouraging cracks. It flourishes in good soil. The danger of pride is that it feeds on goodness. So it's like a dandelion. Overcoming pride then starts with self-awareness. Okay, so self-awareness. The reason why you want to be aware of yourself is because the self is the focus of your pride. And so if ever it comes out, it's always something to do with yourself. But the question is, how do I become aware of myself? Like when you're telling jokes, are you aware that you're trying to be the number one on the joke ranks? Are you aware that you're trying to beat other people? And so in terms of being self-aware, one of the best ways to be aware of yourself is what they call self-reflection. Like when you are alone, Jesus did so much of this. When he goes to the mountain to be alone, it's like basically as followers of Jesus, we have that practice that Jesus exemplified for us. To be self-aware is to reflect on ourselves. The only way for us to reflect on ourselves is to be alone. Like we cannot reflect with other people. Like in a group like this, it's hard to practice self-reflection. So Jesus did this, and so he was self-aware. Listen to what Jesus says about himself. He goes like this: I am the light of the world, I am the Son of God, the way, the truth, and the life, I am the bread of life. And then he even goes to say, I came to seek and save that which is lost. So really he is aware of who he is and why he is here. And so self-awareness begins with self-reflection, and it's the best way to overcome pride. Listen to these other reasons or how pride comes out. For example, this is from a discipleship journal I saw. Inconsistent prayer life is a sign that you have pride, because when you're inconsistent in your prayer life, you're not really asking God. It suggests that we don't rely on God because we proudly think we can do it on our own. Another one is being tired all the time. When you're tired all the time because you're working all the time, that means you have pride because you're not trusting in God to provide. So you should work, yes, but not overwork yourself to death, because God provides for those He loves. We mentioned that last week. Anger. Anger can indicate we are not trusting God's plan and timing, and so we are upset when things don't go our way, and they never do go our way. Have you noticed that? And so that's another sign. And if you take responsibility for your success and your accomplishment, that's pride. Because we don't see that God graciously provide everything. And if we are impatient with things, to listen, if you are impatient in waiting on the aisle or paying for your stuff at a grocery store, you're impatient, that's a sign of pride. And also, two more things that John Ortberg added in his book called The Life You've Always Wanted. He adds vanity and stubbornness. Stubbornness is we are not willing to listen to other people's advice. That's a sign of pride. Vanity, he says, if you're always looking at the mirror, you have pride. Everybody looks at the mirror. Yeah, we all have pride, right? He says, if you are in the gym and you're always exercising but looking at the mirror, that's a sign of pride. So watch yourself, check yourself where you are, but the best way to check yourself is to be self-aware. And to be self-aware, you need to reflect. You need to have self-reflection, time alone with God. It is built into our ETS, into our discipleship, time alone with God. So here's the second part. To be self-aware is not enough, because you can be aware of yourself and still be proud, right? Wow, I'm good. I noticed myself. Did you see yourself? You're good. Or even if you are humble, you can still be proud that you have humility. Isn't that cool? Pride comes in so many ways. Even if you say, oh, the problem with humility is you cannot tell people and say, you know what, I'm humble. Brother, you know what, I'm humble. Yeah, right. You need to show humility, not tell people. So that's the problem with this humility. So the only way to show people is to practice selflessness. The opposite of selfless is selfish. Here's what it says, 5 and 6. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to His own advantage. So when you are selfless, you don't use your position, you don't use your power to your own advantage. Because when you use it for your own self, you are selfish. But if you use it for others, you are selfless. So selfless is thinking less of yourself and thinking more about others. And Jesus thought about us when He came on this earth, gave His life. It was all about us, not about himself. So overcoming pride begins with self-awareness, but it must move us to the selflessness, because we can't tell people we are humble. We need to show people that we are humble. And so a selfless person then is concerned about other people. What is, when I learned this when Nina is not here, so I can't really say this because then it will come out as pride. But anyway, I'll say it anyway, right? It's the best time to say it because Nina is not here. No, seriously, I've learned to always ask her, what are your dreams in your life? What the next 10 years, and she can't see that far, so maybe, okay, the next 5 years, what do you want to do with your life, with our marriage, with our family? Where would you like to go? Where's the place that you dream of going in the world? North Vancouver. Okay, that's cool. But you always want to ask your spouse. So if you're married, or if you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, it's a good practice. Or if you have kids, it's all good practice to ask about other people. Instead of saying, I'd like to go to this country, I'd like to visit the world, I like to do this. So it's all about the I. And so ask other people. That's called being selfless. Because selflessness is the opposite of selfishness. And so pride. Actually, by the way, before we continue, there is a good pride and a bad pride, okay? There is, in Galatians 4, I checked, it says there, each one should test his own actions, then he can take pride in himself without comparing himself to someone else. So there's a bad pride when you compare yourself, but there's a good pride when you say, God, I'm proud of how you have done this in my life. So you give credit to God. That's Galatians, the context of that. You give credit to God and not of yourself. And that's, that's a good pride. It's a satisfaction of a job well done and the joy that other people, that when you have a joy of other people succeeding, only unselfish people have a joy that other people are doing well. Because if I have pride and I'm not selfless, I will not enjoy other people's success. I will envy their success. And that is the message for next Sunday. So good pride doesn't have arrogance, or it doesn't have the boasting. Let me just give you what bad pride and arrogance talks about. Muhammad Ali, you guys know Muhammad Ali, right? He was young at the beginning, of course, in his fighting career. In one of his flight, he goes in this plane, and then the stewardess said, he's popular already at the time. You got to put your seatbelt. You know what Muhammad Ali says? He goes, Superman need no seatbelt. You know what the stewardess said? Yeah, Superman needs no plane. You want to fly? The boasting is there, but when you just think about yourself, that's being selfish. You think about others, that's being selfless. Here's what the Bible, Book of Proverbs, thinks about pride. He goes like this. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to Him. You know what the number 1 is? It says haughty eyes. You know what a haughty eyes is? No, you're not hot. That's not what it means. It means you are arrogant and superior. You hope it was you have a hot eyes, no? You're arrogant, you feel superior. That is pride, and that is what God hates the most. It's number 1 on His list. Wow. God hates the most is an arrogant person. And so if you are selfish, you think of yourself. If you are selfless, you think of other people. I don't know if you've heard this story about a turtle. It gives an idea of what it means to the danger of pride. This turtle, he wanted to spend time in Florida for the winter. He forgot that the Hurricane Irma was coming. But he wanted to go there, but he can't fly. And if he walks, it would take him weeks, maybe months, before he gets to Florida. So he had an idea. He goes, I will ask two of my geese friends to hold the rope at the other end, and then he goes, I will bite with their jaw is really strong, right? So he will bite on the rope, and that's how he will get to Florida. So his two friends agreed to hold the rope, and he went on the middle with his jaw biting the rope. So the flight was doing so well until on the ground somebody noticed and said, wow, that's a good idea. Whoever thought of that? And then the turtle couldn't hold it to take the credit. And he shouted, I did! I did! It's really a danger thing to have this pride, to be selfish. Why don't you give others the credit? Here's what I learned from a book that I'm still trying to implement, okay? About this issue of pride. When there's success in an organization like the church, give others the credit. I'm learning that. If there's a problem in the church, take the blame. I'm still learning that, but that's my goal. Any good success, give others the credit. When you are a leader in your organization, where you work, in your family, a leader gives credit to others when there is success and takes the blame when there's a problem. Here's the third one. So self-awareness moves us to selflessness, and then it even goes deeper into servanthood. Listen to this text. It says, rather, this is Jesus, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself and by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. So Jesus, it says that even though he was God, if you read the context of Philippians 2, it says that God, Jesus Christ, is fully God. He is fully divine, but he never used his full divinity for his own advantage. He did not shed his full divinity when he came to earth. He's still fully God when he came to be a human being, but he did not use that to his full advantage. He could, but he did not. And so that is very good example of what it means to be a servant. And it says Jesus was a servant. So it comes down to us as an example of what it means to be a servant. So this message of God is to us. I read this book. So what it means to be a servant, from a book called Steward Leader by Scott Rudin. He goes like this. The message of Jesus on Philippians 2, it says that disciples are increasingly in awe of the fact that all of life is a gift. Every possession, every relationship, and every breath originates from the hand of God. Therefore, the only lifestyle that is rational is that of the servant, and the one whose joy increasingly becomes the result of seeking someone else's joy. So, if all you seek is the joy of others, that's what it means to be a full servant. And so when you seek the joy of other people and not yourself, then you are on the road to overcoming pride. Because the center of pride, remember, is what? Is the self. So you're trying to shed that by focusing on others. And Jesus did that. Focused on serving others, on servanthood. And so here's some truth about humility. So obviously, the opposite, I was thinking that the opposite of pride is humility. But I'm thinking that's the humility is not really the answer to pride. Because what is humility? There's also false humility. Right? So you can't say that the humility is the solution to pride. The solution to pride is exactly what Jesus exemplified. Be aware of yourself, think more of others, and serve others, just as Jesus did the same. So humility is not really, yes, humility is not convincing yourself that you are nothing. Humility is about, it's not about convincing ourselves that we are unattractive or that we are incompetent. Because some people think that humility is a kind of, in the case of Jesus, because it says in our text that he humbled himself and gave himself up. But the process of his humility, it starts from self-awareness, and then it goes down to selflessness, thinking about less of himself, and then to servanthood. And so yes, humility is also very important because that's what God tells us. But that's not the answer. The process is the answer. Humility has a process to it. So here's the result of Jesus' humility. Can we read this together? Ready, go. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So there is humility. But the process toward humility is self-awareness, selflessness, and servitude. There's a story about Ronald Reagan. He went to Mexico to speak. This was when he was not the president yet. He was the California governor. So he went to speak in Mexico. After he spoke, nobody really clapped. So it was kind of awkward for him. So he sat down silently into his seat. And then there's one guy who followed him. He was saying this in his memoir. He says that the guy who followed him, every sentence, he didn't understand because it was in Spanish, but every sentence this guy said, people clapped. So he said, oh, that was awkward. Nobody clapped at my speech, but this guy claps every sentence. So then he goes, I started clapping before everybody else, just to show humility, right? So he started clapping before everybody else and started shouting even longer after everybody else, so people can hear that he also appreciates, right? Until the ambassador said to him, if I were you, I wouldn't do that, because this guy is actually translating your speech. So he was like clapping at his own speech, shouting at his own speech, until he found out that it was a translation. And so we learn from our mistake, but self is the focus of pride. So examine yourself. Where is your self-awareness? So starting Monday, spend a few moments in your day. Where am I? When you are self-aware, you're aware of your thoughts, of your habits, of your actions. And when you are aware of that, do you think more about yourself or do you think more about others? The awareness allows you to change gear to think of others and start serving other people. So what has God taught you today? Here's what God taught me this week. And I will close with this about humility. For some reason, God always He teaches me first before I teach the church, which is good for me. Except sometimes I feel like, God, do I need to experience this every time? As you know, fall is coming, right? Just in case you haven't noticed, we just had our last weekend, I think, of fall, right? I don't know if you know this, but maybe you feel the same thing. When there's fall, my energy falls too. Like, I have kind of is this a seasonal, what is it called? A seasonal something disorder. Huh? Attractive disorder. A season. Oh, okay. Affective. Affective. Okay. It's sad, right? I thought you said seasonal attractive disorder. Seasonal affective disorder. But I don't have that, I think. Okay, here's the thing. When there's a change of season, I realize that my emotion also changes. Like, wait a minute. So this is the self-awarenesses, right? Why do I become kind of sad too? That the summer is over, that the sun. So then I start thinking like the turtle. Except not Florida. Go like Caribbean or something. And so you always realize, and God makes me realize, wait a minute, you're thinking about yourself. You should think about others. Although I already booked my vacation, by the way. So it's kind of, but the lesson is still there. The lesson is there that, how about other people? And so I've learned this week to actually, you know what that helped me? Just thinking about that self-awareness of how I feel, of the change of season, and being able to think about others made me realize that my emotion is actually, when I think about other people as more important than myself, it helps me. I think I can go through the whole winter now without being sad. Really, I wish I could explain to you further what I did or how God taught me about focusing others is really the solution to my being sad. The seasonal, which I think affect disorder, is the solution is to think about others. So I'm thinking, well, I can go through the winter. I'll update you how I'm doing, by the way. But that's I think the solution for me is that, remember, I belong to the lions, and if you're honest to yourself, you do too. And so it helped me realize and how to deal with pride in my life is to think about others. Maybe that's a takeaway for you today. Maybe not. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's serving others. But that's the message of God today. Let's pray together.